Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Hey students, welcome to the second lecture of CH101 Chemistry, and I hope you people have gone through the first lecture. So in this lecture, whatever topics are present, we'll discuss about it. But before that, we need to see what things are present in lecture 1, what we have studied from lecture 1, the prerequisites, right? Because without discussing that, we cannot move to the lecture 2. Okay, so in lecture 1, what basically we have seen how the atomic model concept have come up, how this Rutherford's model has come into existence, what is Rutherford's alpha particle scattering experiment, how the experiment was done, what was the experimental setup, and with this experiment how Rutherford have concluded that how an atom looks like, and what things are present inside the atom, what is nucleus, what is electron, what is mass number, what is atomic number, what is isotope, what is isobar, and what about the spaces inside the atom, whether it is empty or not. So everything Rutherford have beautifully explained using his alpha particle scattering experiment and later by his postulates, right, which we known as Rutherford's atomic model, right? But there were few problems that also we have encountered, that Rutherford model says that an electron is an energetic particle and it is moving around the nucleus, and also James Maxwell has proved experimentally and mathematically also that whenever a charged particle is moving, it will lose some energy, right? So if electron is losing energy, then gradually it will move towards the nucleus, right? And one time will come when there will be boom, the atom will collapse, right? But nothing like that is going on. So basically there must be some problem with the Rutherford atomic model. Now how this problem is going to be solved, that is what Bode have said. Bode have given a different theory, little different from Rutherford, though there were some facts which were accepted by Bode from the Rutherford's model, just like the concept of orbits, nucleus, and the nucleus is small in size, it is present at the center, it is containing the protons and neutrons, it is the plus, all have been accepted by Bode because they were absolutely correct, right? And Bode introduced a new term that I have explained in the lecture 1. I think you people remember that it is called stationary state, right? So what is stationary state and how it looks like, that Bode have explained in his particular data, right? So after that, Bode has postulated his own model in which he have shown that whenever the electron is present in a single orbital, it is moving in a single orbit, right? Its energy will be constant, no loss, no gain of energy will be there. But if this electron jumps from one to another orbit, then there is a chance of loss and gain of energy. If it moves towards the nucleus, it will lose some energy will be released. And if it moves away from the nucleus, energy will be absorbed or energy will increase. Just like that, whenever you are away from your home, your energy is high, you are doing you are hanging here and there, you are gossiping, you are fighting, whenever you are apart from home. But inside your home, if you do the same, then you will be punished by your friends, you will be beaten up, right? So that's why your energy becomes less, right? So electrons are just like us, chemicals are just like, because we are actually chemicals, right? We are nothing but chemicals, and I'm not discussing this right now, but we will discuss whenever we'll start the organic chemistry, that how we are chemicals, right? We'll discuss about it. So basically after that, Bode has postulated his own model. He has given postulates, and by using Bode model, multiple things can be calculated, right? So in this lecture, basically what we will see how the radius of atom of a single atom, how the radius of a single atom can be calculated using the Bode atomic model, followed by how the velocity and energy of electrons can be calculated using Bode model. Basically Bode model is based on one electron system, so whatever calculations we people will be doing, it will be based on one electron system only, right? And after that, in the last part of the lecture, we will see how the atomic orbitals look like. Basically we are having 4 different type of orbitals, just like s orbital, p orbital, d orbital, and f orbital. But these 4 different type of orbitals are not in our syllabus, right? So as per our syllabus is considered, we will discuss about s, p, and d orbitals, because f is beyond our scope. Okay, so we will see that also. Accordingly, we have to just formulate these particular things, right? So stay tuned in this lecture and see the lecture up to the end. and I think you will get some very important and interesting things to understand. And there is a questionnaire at the end of the lecture. Try to solve it out. If you are unable to solve it, don't be worried like usual. Just note it down in a piece of paper and we will discuss and we'll solve it out, right? So let's see the lecture. Here you go. So here in this lecture we are going to discuss about the radius of an atom that can be calculated using the Bohr atomic model, right? So how the radius of an atom is to be calculated? See, atom is not having a well-defined boundary, right? None of the atoms have well-defined boundary. It's assumed to be circular, but we cannot say that it is a proper circle, right? So the problem is that whenever we are going to discuss the radius, as we know that radius means from the center to the last circle or something that we are having, right? Now the problem is whenever we are having no idea about the thing that where this particular atom ends, right? What is the specific boundary of an atom? Then there is one big problem, that how to find the radius. Now as far as atoms are considered, the radius can be obtained easily by calculating the distance from the central of the nucleus, which is actually the center of the atom, up to the last shell that is present in a particular atom, right? So Bohr discussed in his postulate, that is a merit of the postulate of Bohr, that how the radius of these particular atoms can be found out, right? So let us go into the details. Now if we see the Bohr model properly, right, it is clearly mentioned that the force of attraction between the nucleus and the electron is actually a combined force which is balanced, right? This electrostatic force is balanced, and whenever an electron needs to be taken out, right, we have to overcome the pull of the nucleus. That is very, very important. Now radius can be found by using a very simple formula, right? The formula is like this, as you can see on the screen, that radius of nth orbit can be found. Nth orbit means the n is the orbit number. It can be found by n square divided by z into 0.529 Armstrong. Now what is 0.529 Armstrong? This is a constant which is used to find out the radius of an atom, right? 0.529 is a constant, and n is atomic number, as we people already know, right? So if we go into the details how it is to be found out, we can take any example that we want, right? Any example. Here this 0.529, this is also denoted by a naught, right, which is the constant. Okay, now if we go for the calculation, you can take just take a pen and paper, okay, and write down, say we want to calculate the details for the third Bohr orbit, right? Details for third Bohr orbit we want to calculate. Okay, now how we are going to get that? For the third Bohr orbit, the Rn will be R3, right? Rn will be R3. Now Rn will be equal to n square by z into 0.529 A, okay, where z is the atomic number. So suppose we are going to calculate it for hydrogen, then what we will write for third Bohr orbit? It will be R3 is equal to 3 square, means 9, divided by 1, which is the atomic number of hydrogen, into 0.529 angstrom. Okay, what we are going to get? The radius of this particular orbit, if you have calculated, see, I know the result, right? You take few seconds and calculate it out. Again I am saying R3 will be equal to 3 square, means 9, divided by Z means atomic number for hydrogen, which is 1, so it is 9 by 1,
into 0.529 angstrom. You can write 52.9 picometer also if you want, right? So what is the result coming? Please check it out. The result is 4.761 angstrom, right? Now 4.761 angstrom is the radius of the third Bohr orbit of hydrogen, right? Or hydrogen-like species, we can say. So this way we can easily calculate that what the radius is and how the radius is to be found. Okay, so we can calculate the radius of any orbit using this particular phenomena. If we are doing it according to Bohr, then it must be hydrogen or hydrogen-like species. Okay, right? So let us go to the next topic that we people are having. In the next topic, we are having velocity of an electron in a Bohr orbit, right? So whenever an electron is moving in a Bohr orbit, we are going to see here that how its velocity of the electron in that particular orbit is to be found. Okay, that is what we are trying to see. If we go into the details, we can easily see that from the Bohr postulates, we can see Z square divided by R square n is equal to mv square Rn. Now here Rn means nothing but nth orbit. Means the equation becomes Z square by R square equals to m v square R, right? Now here if we put the if we deduce the equation, then we are getting v square, that is velocity square, whatever is the target is our target, velocity square is equal to z square divided by rm, right? Okay, now if clearly we can calculate it out, then the velocity will come up like this, whatever is present in your screen. Okay, velocity of a regular electron in this particular orbit, in a Bohr orbit. Okay, this will come like this. Right, velocity will be 2.188 into 108 per centimeter second inverse. Okay. Moving further, we will calculate the energy of an electron in the nth orbit. Right. Now, energy of an electron, this is very, very important, since according to Bohr, energy will be same as long as the electron is present in one particular orbit. And whenever the electron moves from one orbit to the other, then energy will be changing, right? Now this change, again we would like to remind whatever we have done for the first lecture, that if the electron moves towards the nucleus, its energy will decrease, and if it moves away from the nucleus, then its energy will increase, right? So basically, if we go for the formula, then what we people are having, see, energy, as we know, it is always the sum of the potential energy and the kinetic energy. Now, potential energy will be for the stationary, the fixed part that is present in the atom, which is nothing but the nucleus, containing all the positive charges and the neutrons, whereas the kinetic energy will be due to the electron which is moving in the extranuclear part of the atom, right? Now, the potential energy will be negative, and hence it will be given by minus z square by r, where minus signifies that the energy is negative. Why negative? Because the object is fixed, right? While the kinetic energy will be equal to half mv square. Why half mv square? Because it is a normal general equation for kinetic energy for the electrons, right? So as for hydrogen the atomic number is 1, so energy can be easily calculated by the equation En is equal to minus 1 by n square into 13.60 eV per atom, right? 13.60 is the constant value here. So 1 by n square, if we put the value of n, right, for the first, if the electron is moving in the first orbit, second orbit, that we put here, then easily we will be getting the value of the electron, right? Okay, so this was about the calculation of the electron's radius, velocity and energy. Next we will move to a different topic, that is the shapes of s, p and d orbitals, right? Now, as we know that there are 4 different type of orbitals present in a particular atom. One is the first one that comes is the s orbitals. After the s orbitals we are having the p orbitals. After the p orbitals, we are having d orbitals, and after d, finally, there comes the f orbitals. Accordingly, the periodic table has been divided into 4 different sections: the s block, p block, d block, and f block. Right? Now, whenever the last electron, it is as per the electronic configuration actually. Whenever the last electron enters the s subshell or the s orbital, then the element moves to the s block. Similarly, if the last electron enters p orbital, the element will move to the p block. If the last electron enters d orbital, it will move to d block, and if the last electron enters the f orbital, then the electron will move into the f block, right? So this is fixed, and this we have studied in our previous classes, right? Now here the question arises that how these 4 orbitals look like. In this lecture, we'll briefly discuss about sp and d orbital, because f orbital is beyond our scope of the lecture, right? So moving on, we are starting from the s orbitals. If we go into the details of the s orbitals, we need to see what the characteristics of s orbitals are. The first and foremost characteristic is its shape, and it denotes that the shape of the s orbitals are the s orbitals are spherically symmetrical, right? Means they will look like sphere. Now, as you can see in the screen, there are images of 1s, 2s, and 3s orbitals. Now you can see concentric circles, right? You people might be thinking there, why concentric circles are there? Things are very simple. See, there is a term you can see in the image itself which is called node. Question arises, then what is a node, right? Now node is that point or that part where the chance of getting an electron is 0 or negligible, right? In a node we cannot get the electron, okay? Accordingly, nodal surface is that surface which are having no electron, and nodal plane is that plane which are containing the nodes, right? Now the number of node denotes on the principal quantum number itself. Now principal quantum number, I think you are not hearing for the first time, because you have studied this in class 12 also, 11 rather, right? And here also we will study it in the next lecture, that what is principal quantum number. But number of node, basically principal quantum number, I am telling very short, because without that we cannot move further. Thing is, we are seeing 1s, 2s, and 3s. Here 1, 2, and 3 are the principal quantum numbers, right? I'll not go for more details because it is present in the next lecture, right? Now here what we people are having, or here what we people can get, that is in the 1s orbital. Basically, if we go for the calculation of nodes, that how the nodes and nodal surfaces are calculated, or how many nodes are there, we will see that basically there are 2 types of nodes. One is radial node, another is angular node. Now if we ask what is radial node, then radial nodes and angular nodes are the 2 different type of nodes which arises due to radial wave function and angular wave function respectively, right? Now if we go for the formula, then the total number of nodes present in a particular orbital will be given as n minus 1. Total number of nodes will be n minus 1. Radial nodes will be n minus l minus 1, where l is the azimuthal quantum number, and the remaining are the angular nodes. So basically, n minus 1 is the total number of nodes, n minus l minus 1 will be the radial nodes, and l will be the angular nodes, okay, which is nothing but the azimuthal quantum number. Now here if we see that, see for 2s orbital, n minus 1 is the total number of nodes, so here principal quantum number is 2, so n minus 1 becomes 2 minus 1, that means 1 node. So we can see one white type of space inside the 2s orbital, right? It is as simple as that. Similarly, if we go for 3s orbitals, right, here it is clearly mentioned n minus 1 means 3 minus 1, right, means 2. So we are getting 2 nodes for this particular 3s orbital, which has been shown in the figure also, right? So in this way we can calculate the nodes also, and nodes will be present in almost all different type of orbitals, right? Moving on, if we go for the p orbitals, we know that there are 3 set of p orbitals, right, along the 3 axes. One is px, another is py, third one is pz. If the p orbitals are along the x-axis, it is called px. If they are along y-axis, it is called py, and if they are along z-axis, it is called pz. Now, the shapes of p orbitals are dumbbell shape. That means one lobe will be in the positive direction, and another lobe will be in the negative direction. If we go for the axis, basically, right? Now these particular orbitals, as we know that each orbital can have a maximum of 2 electrons. So s orbitals can have maximum 2 electrons. P orbitals are of 3 types. Px can have 2, P1 can have 2, and Pz can have 2 electrons. So gradually, combinedly, if we ask that how many electrons are present in the p orbital or how many electrons the p orbital can contain, then we will go for the fact that p orbital can contain 6 electrons, 2 in px, 2 in py, and 2 in pz, right? Okay. So this was about the p orbital. Now here also there will be nodes, right? And we can calculate the number of nodes as per the formula only. For 2 p orbitals, we can clearly see that 2 minus 1, there will be one node, and that node is the middle of the lobe itself, or it is the point of intersection between the different axes, that we can say. Okay. So p orbitals are basically present at the p block is present at the right side of the periodic table, and group 13 to 18 belongs to this p block. Okay. Moving on, we are having the d orbitals, right? Now d orbitals are very, very important to us. D block elements are called transition metals because they are present between s and p block. Now these d orbitals are, why I am saying that it is very important for us, because d orbitals are of 2 types basically. There are 5 d orbitals which can be divided, I can say rather, or which can be grouped into 2 heads, right? There are basically 2 groups of orbitals. One group is called in between the axis, another group is called along the axis. A few minutes later you will be seeing a video. In that video the p orbitals are represented in 3D, because if we see in 2D we'll try our level best to understand, but I don't think that we will be completely understanding this. But the video, in the video itself, it is present in 3D, right? So if we go for 3D, then clearly you will see how the orbitals look like. Okay. So we will go for that. But before going into that, let us describe what the d orbitals are. See, there are 5 different type of d orbitals. One is dx square minus y square, another is dz square. These 2 are considered along the axis because the lobes will be along the x and y axis for x square minus y square, 3d x square minus y square, and for 3d z square the lobe will be along the z axis, right? The other 3 orbitals are called along the axis. These 3 orbitals are dxy, dyz, and dzx. dxy means the lobe will be between the x and y axis. dyz means the lobes will be between the y and z axis, and dzx means the lobes will be between the z and x axis. Among these 2 different type of sets, the in between the axis orbitals are having less energy. They are basically low energy orbitals, and the other 2 are basically high energy orbitals in presence of external forces, right? Now if we go for the 3D representation, right, you can see directly on the screen that the s orbital is spherically symmetrical. Okay. Now after the s orbital there comes the p orbitals, right? Now here you can see 3 different color of p orbitals, red, yellow, and orange, right? Px is red, py is orange, and pz is yellow. Okay, along x, y, and z axis. Now next comes the d orbital. See, dxz means between x and z axis, right? Then comes dxy. dxy means the blue color lobes are between the x and y axis. This is followed by dzy or yz, which is just in between those axes. Now see, dx square minus y square, the lobes are along x and y axis. Here comes dz square, the lobes are along the z axis, as you people can see, right? Now after this, here combinedly we can see that s, p, and d, how these orbitals in total they look like. Okay, s, p, and d orbitals combinedly how they look inside an atom, that we can see at a glance. See, one by one the orbitals are getting joined, and we can see that. Now as you go for the distribution, right, we can see here clearly it will be mentioned that how the electrons rotate inside an atom, right? Now this is the cross-sectional area of an atom where we can see the nucleus is in between containing the charges, this is the 1s orbital, and you can see the electrons, little particles, they're moving very, very fast, right, in different axes. See, the electrons are moving. The yellow dots are the electrons which are moving without colliding with each other. Okay, right? Now this, after 1s, we are seeing the 2s orbital. Again, more and more electrons are rotating, some inside 1s and some outside 1s. Then comes the p orbitals. Here also see, in the different p lobes, the electrons are moving. See, 1s, 2s and 2p, wonderfully explained in the picture, right? The electrons are moving there. All are having cross-sectional area being shown here, right? Here comes the 3s and 3p orbitals, right? So 1s, 2s, 2p, 3s and 3p. All the orbitals are shown here at a glance. Okay, and the movement of electrons can also be seen. Now comes the red colored 3d orbitals. This thing is becoming complicated. See, we can explain it very easily, but the things are actually not that much easy. They are much complicated if we go for real life viewing, okay, which is not possible actually, right? So let us have some questions and you try to answer these questions, and after the questions are over, if there are any problems, then feel free to contact me. You can ring me up on my number, or you can send a mail or a message to me also. We will see and we will discuss and we will solve the question answers, right? So thank you so much. We will meet in the next lecture. Thank you.